Hello and welcome to another installment of our Women in STEM series. My name is Kaylee Peel and I'm Manager of Strategic Partnerships for the Linda Hall Library. Today our guest is Rachel Ginther from MRIGlobal. Rachel, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So before we start our conversation, I'd love it if you would share some of your background, what led you to MRIGlobal and what your career trajectory has been.
Sure. Yeah. I got my bachelor's in chemistry at St. Louis University. After that, I moved to Kansas and got my PhD in analytical chemistry from the University of Kansas. After that, for a short time, I worked at a contract manufacturer for pharmaceuticals. And right after that, I got my job at MRIGlobal. When I first started working there, my title was a staff chemist, and my job was developing methods for detecting drug substances. I'm trying to make it not sound like it's illegal drugs. For detecting pharmaceuticals in drug products. So making sure that our medicines are safe and have the amount of drug that they're supposed to have in them. After that, I did that for a little while, and now I'm a program manager. So instead of doing the work, I'm managing that work, both internally, like the budget and deliverables and schedule, and keeping track of who's doing what, but also the client-facing side. So managing that client relationship as well.
That's a really interesting, I think, trajectory, but also the work that you do, I think, is very interesting. And I don't know that a lot of people, the title program manager is more ambiguous. So the fact that you've done so much, that's really cool. Explain to me a little bit of what was the kind of impetus of getting into a STEM field? Who were the people, were there historical figures that were, inspirational to you? Were there mentors in your life that pushed you along this path?
Yeah, so as far as historical inspiration that I drew from, honestly, not really. I feel like I didn't know. There's obviously Marie Curie and Rosalind Franklin and all those pioneers in science, but that really wasn't that tangible to me, especially growing up. I think what really inspired me was early on having great teachers, even in elementary school. The first woman that I ever encountered in a STEM field was my 6th grade science teacher, and she just made science really approachable and interesting and related it back to everyday life, and that's what really got me interested.
So historically, and both historically and in present day, we know that women have, a lack of access when it comes to opportunities. Those historical figures, as you mentioned, that might not have been tangible before. So what has that led to as far as experience goes in your career? What has that experience been as a woman in the Kansas City ecosystem, and has that changed over time?
So overall, I would say it's mostly been great. I don't want to come on here and be like, oh, it's all perfect and everything, but I think overall, I haven't experienced a ton of pushback or bias. I think in my specific job and the specific company that I work at MRIGlobal, when I was first hired at the staff chemist level, which is entry level for a PhD, I'll never forget when I was interviewing, I interviewed with my boss, who was a woman, her boss, who was also a woman, and her boss's boss, who I didn't interview with, but she was also a woman. So that was really important to me, just starting out my career, knowing that I would have access to those types of mentors. The only thing that I would say negatively that comes with being a woman is I do feel like I can second guess myself, or if I'm having a weird interaction with a coworker or colleague and it feels like they're not listening, or they're not taking my authority as they should be, it's hard to drill down and see, like, are they acting this way because I'm a woman, or are they just this way with everyone? So that second guessing, I think, is always there. But yeah, overall, it's been pretty good.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I know that, first of all, I think that it's nice to hear that MRIGlobal has presented a more unique opportunity, that you've had so many women mentors in your field. But it's not unique, right, to feel the second guessing and the imposter syndrome that I think a lot of women feel in the STEM ecosystem. So I appreciate you being candid with that. And you mentioned earlier, the concept of women pioneers, and the library's collections really allow our community to learn from and be inspired by women pioneers in STEM. How else can we, aside from the historical standpoint, how can we, as a greater STEM community, best support women and marginalized groups to foster more collaboration and support?
So I think this is a great question. I think there's sort of two pieces to it. So the first piece happens way before people are ready to join the workforce. Like I mentioned, my sixth grade teacher. I think it starts, way. If we're trying to start reaching out to women and getting them interested in STEM once they hit college, that's not early enough. Just as an example, MRIGlobal, I've served on their diversity committee, and one of the programs that we collaborate with is called Letters to a Pre-Scientist, which matches you up with students from underserved communities that want to be interested in STEM, but they really don't know what that means. And it just matches you up with a pen pal, and they can ask you questions, and you can really reach out to them and really make a difference and help them understand what types of STEM careers are out there. Because if we start by the time they're in college and that pipeline isn't there, there's no one to hire in order to make them feel involved and like they belong to the STEM community. So that's sort of step one, really performing that outreach and getting people interested so that the pipeline exists and that there's people that you can help join your workforce. The second part is supporting people once they're in the workforce and in your company. Once people are in the workforce, we need to be supportive of families. One of the things that I'm really passionate about that has affected me recently is I've had 2 babies in the past 3 years, and it's been really, really important to me that I've been able to still fit right in the community at MRIGlobal at my job, and I've felt supported by management, by my peers. So I think having those policies come from the top down is really important to support the workforce, especially women.
I think those are great answers. Thank you for sharing that. And the library, so the youth piece is huge, and you're right about that. And getting in contact and connecting with younger people at a younger age is very important. We have the Kansas City Invention Convention, and we have some other career exploration tools that we use to kind of alleviate that and focus on that. But we also now, to your point, building that talent pipeline is also very important to our corporate partners. So our Business Leadership Council and our mid-professionals group, Stella Nova Society, will kind of alleviate that too. How do we fill a gap when it comes to building pipeline for companies, but also supporting those middle-level professionals? So I'm glad we're on the same page, and I think a lot of our community is. We're all trying to move forward in that direction, and that's very exciting. But what would you say to a young person if you met with them and they're interested in seeking a career in STEM? Aside from getting that exposure at an earlier age, what would you say to them? What advice would you give?
I think just find out what's out there. I know from my own experience, I got my PhD in analytical chemistry, and I still didn't know what jobs were out there even in my later years of grad school. And you don't have to have your PhD in order to go into a STEM field. This is just the track that I took. But when you're in grad school, there's sort of 2 tracks once you graduate. There's the go do a postdoc for a couple of years, maybe do another postdoc, and then become a professor at a research institute institution and publish and do all of that. And then there's this second track that's just industry, and no one ever tells you what that means. So I think if I had had that knowledge at any point, that would have been really helpful to me to understand what jobs are out there, jobs that you never think of existing. I'm sure my job, developing methods to make sure that our medicines are safe, like that's not something that people think is out there. And that would have really excited me to know that something that makes a difference in that way exists. I mean, even at MRIGlobal where I work, it's not just a pharmaceutical research organization. There's all kinds of med research, but there's also defense research that goes on there. There's engineering research that goes on there. There's environmental research, toxicology research. So there's just any number of fields that you can go into, and it's hard to find that information. So hopefully programs like yours can help connect people with professionals and get that information to people. But if no one's telling you, what is out there, then actively go out and seek it. Just honestly Google it and figure out what all is out there, because there's a lot more that may be interesting to you. That, when I was growing up, a career in STEM was you could be a doctor, a engineer, or maybe a professor or something, which are all great careers, but they're not the only ones out there. Like, you don't have to think, oh, I have to go to med school or whatever in order to be in a STEM field. There's so much out there that's really cool.
Yeah, and thank you for that advice. I think it's great. And I think you're right. There's a level of exposure that needs to happen, some connectivity. Those industry professionals being connected to young people is super important. And the library has a How Do I Become series that sheds light on different careers within STEM that young people might not know about otherwise, because you don't know what you don't know, right? So it's important that we start kind of peeling back the layers on some of these roles for young people to explore. And we're not, the library is not just dedicated to the historical aspect of STEM, but, series like this Women in STEM series and the programming that we're doing now, it's more present and in real time. But we also want to support the future of STEM and those future pioneers that are a part of our community. From your point of view, what do you think the future of STEM looks like?
I think it's bright. We talked about that pipeline earlier, and just off the top of my head, back when my parents were in college or starting their careers, there just weren't women even joining those fields. Like, the number of STEM majors was really low for women. In certain fields we've actually surpassed the number of men that are majoring, and I think like chemistry is close and biology is very close. There's some that still have some work to do where it's really not equal. I think engineering is still low and computer science is still low. But when we talk about building that pipeline, that's really important to even have the people that are interested in it. So I think including that pipeline, but also thinking about in the past, the women who have come before us are just now getting to points in their careers where they're able to enact real change. I think there were the pioneering women way before, like the Marie Curies and the Rosalind Franklins, but now we have a whole generation of women who are coming up to the director level and to the C-level executive offices. And I think that will be really important when we talk about having sort of those top-down policies that allow women to feel supported in the workplace and in STEM specifically. So there's two pieces, including the past and leading up to the future, but then also those future women who are just now getting started. So I think it's bright.
It's bright indeed, and I agree with you. Thank you so much for your time, Rachel. I really appreciated your insight, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Yeah, thank you for having me.